Dr. Kwame Morton, Superintendent here in Cherry Hill Public Schools. It is my pleasure today to be joined by Mrs. Lynn Shugars, Business Administrator Extraordinaire and Assistant Superintendent. Shugars, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely, Dr. Morton.
So we want to spend some time today just speaking about budget. So you had an opportunity to present your initial budget presentation at the March 11th Board of Education meeting. Can you just talk about, for a moment, the process and the timeline that goes into the development of the district's budget?
Yes, we actually start that at the end of October, usually. So we're just getting the new school year underway, and we have to start thinking about the next school year. The reason we do that is because we take input from all of the schools, all of the departments, and they need time to put their budgets together, get quotes, or look into different things that they might want to include in their budget. So we like to give them plenty of time to do that. So they have until the end of December to put their budgets together. And then starting in January, we do review at the Superintendent Council level, so that we can start looking at the requests that have been made, the personnel needs that there are. And then we continue that process through February. Our initial submission budget is typically due by March 20th, so we have to approve an initial submission budget prior to that. After that approval process, we are kind of in a holding pattern, and once we receive approval on our budget from the county office, we can have our public hearing at the end of April. So literally, this process is the end of October to the end of April every year, so it takes up a good bit of our school year.
Absolutely, very lengthy process.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if everyone is aware of that or recognizes that, so I'm happy you were able to highlight that.
Mm-hmm.
So Ms. Shugars, I'll never forget last year when you walked into my office with the state aid figures and information that the district had incurred quite a significant loss.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the past 2 years state aid funding that we received and the losses that have been incurred?
I actually want to go back one more year and talk about the year before when we received additional state aid, and we were very encouraged by that.
Right.
And then as we went into the 24-25 school year to put that budget together, we literally lost the aid that we had received the year before.
Right.
And that was very difficult and problematic for us. So we lost $7 million worth of state aid for the 24-25 school year. We needed different ways to address that loss. We had to make some cuts. Right. We had to adjust some of our other revenue sources in order to accommodate that. A lot of the cuts, we were very fortunate last year. We were able to not actually cut people.
Right.
We were able to cut positions. And so by rearranging and reconfiguring and relying on attrition, which we have each year in terms of retirements and people who move on to other districts, we were able to make those cuts without affecting people. Coming into this year, as we've lost another $4 million in aid, that's becoming more difficult to do. We know that when 75% of our budget is personnel costs, it's going to be difficult to make those kind of cuts and make up those differences without looking at personnel. So we have taken a look again this year at personnel. We have been able to accommodate some of the cuts again by looking at vacancies that we have.
Right.
We know that in the coming months we'll have additional retirements.
Right.
And we're hoping that some of the cuts that we have to make this year can be more reassignments rather than, again, cutting people, maybe just positions instead. Unfortunately, at some point, I think that's going to become difficult to do if we continue to have the kind of cuts in our aid that we have.
Right.
But we don't start with personnel, right? We start with other things because, we are a personnel-driven entity.
Absolutely.
And, our goal is to meet the needs of our students.
Absolutely.
So we try to maintain as many personnel positions as we can. So our review starts with projects, supplies, services, all of those kinds of things first, and we take a look at them first. But that's 25% of our budget.
Right.
And some of those things are very fixed cost. Utilities, insurance, those kinds of things are fixed costs that we don't have a lot of wiggle room with. So, we do our best to make non-personnel cuts, but we have found in the past couple of years we've had to make personnel cuts as well.
Always challenging.
Very challenging.
So at the March 11th Board of Education meeting, you uncovered what I consider to be a pretty significant discrepancy as it relates to the loss of our equalization aid.
Yes.
You did some calculations and ran some figures that were extremely interesting. Why did we lose equalization aid this year?
That's a really good question. And when I went back and took a look at it, I wanted to do a deeper dive because I wanted to see what has changed in the past couple years that has affected our receipt of the equalization aid. When you're calculating equalization aid, there's two parts to that. And the first part is the adequacy budget calculation, and that's based on our enrollment. And then the second part is local fair share. So local fair share is affected by equalized valuations in Cherry Hill as well as district income in Cherry Hill. So basically, the state is looking at what it costs to educate children versus what the local ability to educate children is.
Right.
And then the difference is what they call equalization aid. As I went back and I looked at previous year calculations, the formula has not changed. What has changed are multipliers, right? So at the end of the formula, there are these multipliers, and they have varied slightly over the past couple of years.
Sure.
But this year, there was significant changes in those multipliers. And ultimately what that means is that they're starting with a pot of money at the end and they're working backwards. And that unfortunately was very detrimental to Cherry Hill. We saw a 17 and 18% increase in those multipliers, and that affected our ability to receive equalization aid. We lost all of our equalization aid.
Has that ever happened?
Not in my time here, it has not. Our local fair share is now greater than the adequacy budget, and therefore we did not receive equalization aid. Now in 24-25, we received $15 million in equalization aid.
Right.
So to lose all of that aid this year was shocking. But we did later find out that there are a significant number of districts across the state that have lost that aid. So we went, there was about 398 districts, I believe, that were getting it, and I believe that number now is down around 250.
Wow.
So we weren't the only ones that lost it.
Right.
More concerning for me is not just getting through this budget year,
Right.
it's what does that mean for the future for the
Absolutely.
Cherry Hill School District. Districts across the state were held harmless to a 3% loss in aid. For us, that was about $884,000. However, we also lost, as you know, the stabilized aid that we received last year.
Last year, yeah.
So last
Absolutely.
year, after we went through our budget process, there was an opportunity for us to get additional aid, and we
Right.
did in about $3.1 million. And we were able actually to restore some of the things that we had initially cut.
Absolutely.
This year, we were held harmless to the 3%, but we also lost that $3.1 million in stabilized aid.
Right.
So our total loss was about $4 million. According to the documents that we got, it should have been around $11 million.
Wow.
And so you and I have been having conversations about what does that mean for Cherry Hill
Long term, absolutely.
long term, and we need to start having conversations about the budget in non-budget time
Right.
as we move forward about what kind of fundamental changes are we going to have to make if that is in fact Cherry Hill's new reality.
Absolutely, absolutely. So can you give like an overview of some of the key components of the March 11th presentation that you gave, including any reductions, additions to staffing and things along those lines?
Yes. On the 11th, our budget wasn't finalized at that point. We are now pretty much finalized at this point as we get prepared to approve it on Tuesday night. So it was a draft budget that we presented, and again, we will be making cuts. We made cuts to non-personnel areas first. We also took a look at some of the positions. Now we have some support positions that we're going to cut. Those are not classroom teacher positions. They're support positions throughout the district that we're taking a look at. We were fortunate that a significant number of those were able to be accommodated through vacancies that we had, so they're just positions that we won't fill. Probably the biggest factor that we're looking at is a reconfiguration of our middle schools.
Right.
To go from a teaming middle school model to a junior high school model.
Right.
And we're hoping, even though that is a significant number of positions, that some of those positions can be reallocated or placed in other areas. But we feel that not only is that a good budget move because it has lasting savings,
Right.
but that also it's a good move in terms of educating our children.
Absolutely.
So that is one of the biggest factors that we're going to see in this budget this year. moving from that model.
Yeah, so if I can elaborate on that model just a bit as well, it's been probably 2 decades, slightly more than 2 decades, that Cherry Hill has utilized the middle school model. Once upon a time, Cherry Hill did have a junior high school model. My understanding is that when 6th grade transitioned to the middle level and the MYPYP program, MYPPYP International Baccalaureate Program was introduced, that the advisory and teaming were added, thus making up the middle school model. Some could argue that the use of a junior high school model provides an academically focused program. I think it's unquestionable, just as you have articulated, from a matter of fiscal responsibility and a matter of maximizing resources, staffing allocations, and making sure people are assigned to critical needs areas. It definitely makes sense. As a former high school principal and one who's been around the district for a while, I can tell you that a junior high school model helps children to transition to the high school level probably a bit better because the models match that what happens in high school as well. So doesn't affect what students experience. Students still have all the arts and they have core academic classes and the same environment. It just allows us to run leaner and more efficient. So I think it's a sound move.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a sound move. And as you mentioned, if we are going to be faced with possible losses in future years, it makes sense to have things that are sustainable year over year over year. What is the actual tax increase this year? Dollar amount, percentage amount? I know you mentioned the use of the 2% cap as well as bank cap. Can you just talk about that?
Sure. We are held to a 2% cap, 2% increase on our tax levy each year. That is the max that the district can increase taxes each year. Now, there are some exceptions to that. There are what they call spending growth limitation adjustments. And these are for things like increases in cost of health benefits, if you opened a new school, if you had a large increase in enrollment. They allow you to expand that cap a little bit. Right. We actually were able to expand our cap a little bit this year for health benefits. So we have a small increase due to health benefit costs. So that'll be a small piece of it. And then we also have banked cap. And banked cap means that in previous budget years, we didn't go to that full 2%.
Right.
Or we had one of those spending growth limitation adjustments and we didn't utilize all of it.
Right.
So we have about $1.3 million in banked cap right now. We originally thought we might use it all. In the last couple days, as we have been working with the state software program that we have to work with to put our budget in, we have discovered that we do have a small adjustment because of the health benefits. So we won't use all of the 1.3 banked cap. The end result is the same. It's an expansion of your cap. We'll have a small piece of the increase because of the adjustment. We'll have a small increase because of the banked cap that we will use. We also will have a small increase in our taxes due to debt service. Now, debt service and payment of principal and interest on the bonds is not part of our general fund budgeting process that we are talking about right now. That is because we approved the bond referendum a couple years ago.
Right.
Now we have to pay that back. But we always talk about that because it has an effect on the taxes as well.
Right.
So the overall increase in the taxes, the average assessed home in Cherry Hill is $227,000. Right. So for the average assessed home, the increase with the general fund and the debt service fund is about $180. It's just under $180.
Okay.
So this is about...
And that's for the full year and not...
That is for the full year, yes. So that is that is the tax impact for the full year. So I think that equates to about 2.63% overall.
Okay.
In terms of, when we compare last year to this year.
You also had some staffing additions built into this year's budget as well.
We did, fortunately. We were able to look at where our needs were. We added a math coach in at the elementary level, and we added in 5 interventionists, which is huge. 2.5 will be dedicated to the elementary school, 2.5 will be dedicated to the middle school. And again, as we are making cuts in some areas, we're hoping that we can reassign some people to some of those new positions as well. We have to make sure certifications are correct and all those kinds of things, but the hope is that maybe we can kind of reassign and reposition.
Absolutely. So if we did not go to the full 2% or use the full amount of bank cap. What does that mean? What additional cuts would we need to make?
Nothing on that list was anything that was particularly appealing, but we would look at class sizes at the elementary school, which is difficult. That's a very tough decision. We
Yes.
would look at courtesy busing. Again, another tough decision because just the nature of Cherry Hill and how large it is and where our children are attending, and also what that means in the mornings in terms of parent drops-offs and those kinds of things.
Right.
So those would be two areas that we would look at. We would also probably have to look at some of the new positions that we've been able to incorporate in the past couple years.
Right.
Math coaches, some of those kinds of things.
Literacy support.
Literacy
teachers.
support, exactly. So we would have to look at some of those kinds of things and pull some of those kinds of things back.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Shugars. I really appreciate the information. Appreciate you taking an opportunity to share this information with the community. More information about budget items and understanding how you might be an advocate for Cherry Hill Public Schools, please follow the Fair Funding Committee's Facebook page. Follow Cherry Hill Public Schools' Facebook page and our social media accounts. Also, please follow our new website for updates and ongoing happenings in the district.